Recording in progress. Good morning and welcome to lecture 10. So today we're going to explore opacity maps. So opacity maps we utilize when we want to remove geometry at render time. Actually, portions of geometry. This becomes important for us with the wine label. So anybody doing the exterior scene, you will definitely need this. Projection mapping. This allows us to do decals, stickers, very similar to Unity, Unreal, even Substance has them. We're going to get into layered textures. This is Maya's layering system for textures. Oops, too many S's, textures. Whenever you do layering, you need blend modes, which we found out in Photoshop. So anytime you've got more than one layer, it needs to interact with other layers under it. Actually, it's not Maya's system. It's kind of a misnomer. It's Maya's way of doing it, but it works the same way it does in Photoshop. So Photoshop, Substance Painter, Maya, most layering systems have blend modes. So layer interaction. We probably won't get to displacement maps. We'll probably leave that. There's a Maya reverse utility. This one is probably one of the most used utilities next to the bump and also next to the gamma correct that we used for glass. So this allows us to desaturate oversaturated images without going into Photoshop. Now, granted, you can still go into Photoshop, you tone your image, you get it all set up to go. But, you know, there's times when you don't really want to go back into Photoshop. You create a utility, you plug your texture in there, you plug that utility into your material, into the color channel, and you know, you have complete control interactively in Maya in real time with desaturation, which is a great thing. Got a link inside lesson 7.1 for Maya's layered texture reference. It's a PDF. You can download it, obviously. It's part of our OneDrive link setup in there. They're PDFs. You can download them. You can view them online, however you want to do it. But it's just good reference because it's got a comparison between Photoshop's layering system, Maya's layering system, and also blend modes in Maya and what they do, which is another big thing. It's nice to know that you have blend modes, but what do they do? All right. So tomorrow and Friday, I'll be out of the office. If you need help, though, still go to Discord. Anthony Bagsby will be here on Friday to kind of help you guys wrap up the course. See if you need, you know, last minute demos and critiques. It's a good time to get it in lab. You can still get critiques on Discord, but in lab, it's a little different because you can get it interactively and, be able to make changes rather than, post, wait, we critique, you come back, you get it, you work on it. So we can save a lot of time. Frank or Ari will also be doing the open lab tomorrow. Zoom open lab optional for online and campus students. So, any questions so far? All good. Okay, Michael Vernon's good. Jackson's good. Take a screenshot.
All good here.
All right, all's good there. Thank you, Will. Take a screenshot for attendance. Get everybody in here. Tyra's good. Kyle's good. Yangi's good. Derek is good. Michael. All right, awesome. Thank you. All right, so as I mentioned, opacity maps. We're going to use this for cutting out the shape of the wine label to make it unique so that it looks like it's glued onto the bottle in the exterior wine bottle. So this is absolutely mandatory. You're not going to have a bottle of wine 98% of the time without a label on it. And also, we want our wine label to conform to marketing standards, which means as it sits on a shelf in an aisle, you want to be able to see the entire label without having to pull the bottle out and turn it. When people are looking at wine, research has shown that their eyes will go to the label. And if there's more information on the side of the label, chances are they will not look at it unless it's wine you're familiar with all the time. So the whole idea is we want our label to conform to marketing standards so that when they sit side by side, you see the entire label. File projection, file mapping, which is we're using a projection. We're going to do SAL logo outside, and we'll probably do the interior AAA logo on the thermos. So layered textures, definitely in Maya, adding wear and tear. Anytime you use layering, you need blend modes, as we talked about. We already talked about adjusting base weight so that if you have a texture you put on an object and the lighting is really bright, you don't want to adjust the lighting for one object. You want to adjust how the object responds to the light, and that is adjusting the base weight. Displacement maps, we probably won't have time to get to them, but Tony Bagsby, I'll make sure he gets to them on Friday for you guys. It's not mandatory, but it is definitely something you want to know how to do. All right, so let's talk about opacity maps. So opacity maps, alpha maps, cutout maps, whatever you want to call them, they're basically just black and white maps. When they are applied to the right section of the material, black will be transparent, white will be opaque. Opaque meaning that whatever is behind the white remains. Or I should say whatever is in front of the white remains, because that alpha channel sits as the fourth channel in our RGB system. So if you remember, we're using RGB, red, green, blue, and then we have alpha. So these contain your color information. This contains opacity, alpha, however you want to look at it. Now, a lot of this alpha information, the way we use it is going to have different names depending on the software you're using. But it's really an alpha channel. It's full black and white information. We use it for transparency, for cutout, for removing parts of geometry at render time. So very simple. For example, up here, I have it in as a separate file into our sphere on the table. And you can see anywhere that is black, that has been removed. Anywhere that's white, that is opaque. That means it's kept. It's also reflected in the shadow. You can see through the geometry. And the nice thing about using it for a wine label on our bottle is if you get an interesting wine label shape, you cut it out to the shape of your label, and it looks like the label is glued onto the bottle rather than just wrapped around the bottle with a cylinder, which is basically what we have. So this gets plugged into the geometry section. So if you remember, geometry is where we clicked on thin wall to make our glass window panes look like glass. We have the transparency, we have the reflectivity, we have the look of glass without calculating refraction. This is also where we plug in our bump mapping here, and now we're using it for opacity. All right, so quick poll. How many people are doing the exterior scene? So how many are doing interior? So we got one from Michael. Jackson, which one are you doing? Interior. All right, so we got one exterior, one interior. Lauren's doing interior. Katerina's doing the interior. Yangi's doing the interior. Anybody else? Potentially interior. You mean you haven't decided? Ooh. Yeah, you should be about 3/4 of the way through your assignment there, Michael.
I'm working on both right now because I couldn't really decide.
Okay, yeah, you really need to pick one because they are going to have different requirements depending on which one you do. So potentially the interior. All right, so we'll give you an interior. And Derek's doing interior. So we got 6. All right, Tyra's doing exterior. We got 2. Anybody else? Javier, which one are you doing? Nicholas, which one are you? Let's see, who else do we need? Yeah, Will, Janelle. Javier's doing the exterior. Okay.
Sorry, I'm doing the exterior.
Exterior.
Had to go first.
All right, so we got 4 for the exterior. Okay, excellent. All right, well, I mean, I was going to do the demo anyway, because even if you are not doing it for the entire class, that doesn't mean that the online people aren't doing it. So just trying to get a feel for where the balance is. So it looks like it's probably tilted slightly towards interior, but doesn't look like it's a landslide completely. All right, so let's talk about how we're going to do this. First off, we want to make sure that we find reference. We find reference, wine bottle, wine label, and then we need to find a wine label texture. So usually the wine label is determined by your wine. You don't want to have a wine label that has Chardonnay or, some other kind of wine that is not what your wine is. And I believe we made red wine. So Chardonnay or any white wine or pink wine is pretty much out. Let me crank up Maya and see what we got here. Because I'm pretty sure we did red wine, but it's always good to double check. And also take a look at your reference. Because in theory, you should have that all picked out. RenderMan, come on, Arnold. There we go. So let's set project. No, 8 is what we want. Okay. No, there's my sphere. You know what? Let's throw that on a separate layer. Let's turn that off. Let's turn the table setting on. Yep, red wine looks like. Yep, red wine. Okay. And let's see, what else do we need? We want to turn the wine label on. Remember, we threw that onto a display layer when we were making glass. So let me save as, so I have a separate copy here. So this is lecture 10. Let's turn the wine label on. There we go. So we're going to be doing the daytime just because that's what I've got started from when we were demoing earlier. All right, so red wine. So now we have our mission here. So let's go pull up this. And let's go images. So red wine label texture. And let's look at the size under tools, make it large so we get enough information. So you can find a blank label if you so desire and make it your own. It's going to take a little work. You have to do it in Photoshop. You have to make it so it has an alpha channel. Personally, I'm going to be working with a, name brand or sort of name brand real wine label. So Smith Street Wines and Vineyards, that's Cabernet Sauvignon. That happens to be red wine. So nice, kind of plain though. If I'm going to go through the trouble of cutting a wine label out, I want an interesting shape. I don't want a square or a rectangle. So Rocco, Pinot Noir, that happens to be red wine. If you're not sure, you can always look up the name to make sure it is. That's kind of got an interesting little bit of a cutout there. Other than that, it's kind of a rectangle. Let's see what else we got here. Rocco, you do not want wine labels on bottles. So these are a bunch of bottles. I don't want that. Where are we at? So we still have Pinot Noir here. No. Let's go find. Don't forget, anytime you change your search, you're going to have to redo it for size. So now that I took out the word red, I get less wine labels. So let's, or no, actually I put it in there, but it's still terrible. All right, let's try this. Large. Okay, Pinot Grigio. I believe that is red, but company name, so that tells you that is a generic wine label. So what I could do is just, let's look up some red wines. See if we can find an interesting wine label shape. Okay, an awful lot of rectangles. Kind of an interesting wine label, a little on the large side for my taste. Come on. Now, I have a couple that I look at every month, but I always just like to look on Google just to make sure I don't miss anything. Or so this one, kind of interesting. It's got this octagon shape going on here. Yeah. Also, you want to take a look at the shape of the bottle. Something like this, our bottle's a little bit higher. It's not quite so big of a bulge in the center. Also, this one has kind of a sloping, gets a little narrower at the bottom. Ours is pretty standard issue wine label. All right, so let me pull up what I already know that I have, and we can always search for those because I like to make sure they are still current. All right, where are you? Yeah, okay, must have closed that window. Let's go here. Zen Garden, source images. So got a bunch of wine labels. Martin Sancho. There's a red wine. Kind of an octagon shape. Let's see what else we got here. There's Rocco. Pinot Noir. Here's another one, Cabernet Sauvignon. That happens to be red. This is Farniente. Napa Valley. It's always an interesting shape. It's the one I have in my slide. What else we got here? White Zinfandel. That happens to be pink. So unless you've got pink, don't do that. Okay, Woodbridge, that's not bad. That's white Zinfandel, that's pink also. It's kind of an inverted shape from the Rocco, where it's got the little logo down at the bottom rather than at the top. Rocco. This one's interesting. That's Chardonnay. That happens to be white. Smith Street. Yeah, kind of just a plain old rectangle. All right, sometimes in here, I've got different folders. Martin Sancho, Rocco, Bordeaux, that's red. Gallo, White Zinfandel, got to be careful what you have. White Zinfandel. All right, let me do a search for Farninti, because that's always a good shape to do. There we go. So Chardonnay, Cabernet Sauvignon. Chardonnay is white, Cabernet is red. So that's not too bad of a size. Let's make sure we get large. Yep, Cabernet. That's a good shape. You can see you get varying levels of color. Some look like they've tried to color correct them. Some look like they don't. So the wine label itself is fairly large on the bottle. It's kind of the downside. Not all of them, though. This one's a little more. Now, just so you know, we have requirements for the wine label. You must be able to see the wine bottle on all four sides. So if you're going to use Farninti, then you scale it up, but make sure we've got a little bit of room on the sides. That is in our SAL look development guide. And I'm also mentioning it here. So this top part, that's going to be, we're not going to worry about that. We're just worried about the actual body of the label. This happens to be Chardonnay, but doesn't matter. Whether you're doing Cabernet Sauvignon, which is red, or Chardonnay, we need to be able to see the wine label on all sides. It's interesting. That's actually a pretty cool shape. I've never seen that one. Ooh, and it's big. Let's go with this. Ooh, this is exciting. Dear Diary, today I found a new wine label. It was so exciting. Oh, sorry. No, nobody keeps a diary. Everybody puts everything on Facebook or social media somewhere. I've had the most excellent time. Okay, so yes, that is a nice, interesting shape. Now, a couple things about your wine label when we go to process it in Photoshop. For one, you need to have visible background on all sides. Like this, that's too close. So what we're going to do is we're going to take it into Photoshop, expand what we call the canvas, which doesn't make the image bigger, it just makes the background bigger. Because when we create the alpha channel needs enough room to realize it is a continuous background to create the alpha portion of it. All right, so post and beam, Cabernet Sauvignon, yes. So let's go do that. I want that. All right. So there's our wine label. And actually what I'm going to do is take my wine label and let's see if we can find it on a bottle first. So I got my label. Post and beam. And of course, here we go. Dang, that's huge. Okay, ours is not going to be that huge. We need to conform to, being able to see the wine label on all four sides. So for that, we're going to take some liberties with it, make it a little smaller than normal. And actually, I think it will actually look better. Not a big fan of edge-to-edge wine labels. It looks like you're trying to cram like 10 pounds of information in a 5-pound label. All right, good enough. So what I'm going to do at this point is take my wine label and drop it into my source images folder. So I got source images, then I've also got another separate folder called Zen Garden. And here it is. So I'm going to just kind of rename this post and beam wine label. Remember, don't use ampersands like we have there. Just going to use lowercase. Okay, so it's alphabetical. Perfect. All right, now we go in and we start processing this in Photoshop. So we've got our wine label, picked it out. Let's open with Photoshop. So in Photoshop, we're going to do a few things to this wine label. Like I said, we want to make sure that we have enough room all around the label so that there's clear canvas around it. So in Photoshop, you can resize the image. You can also resize the canvas, which is considered to be the background. So what I want to do is let's take image, canvas size, and I don't like to work in pixels. Let's work in inches. And I like to add about a ½ inch to the width and the height. So literally, I mean, this is going to be like 16.25, 18.25. Let's try that. 16.25, 18.25. And in Photoshop, you'll see that there's this thing called an anchor. Whenever you go to resize something, either the canvas or the image, generally it's right in the middle, which means it will expand it or extend it in all directions. But you can reset that anchor to be anywhere. So if you want it to stay at the top, but go left, right, and then just go down rather than up, you stick it in the middle. If you pin it to the left side, it'll extend to the right and down and diagonally down, obviously, because you're extending to the right and down, but it will not go left or up. So you can set this anywhere you want. Generally, middle is exactly what you want. I want my canvas extension color to be white, which is what I have back here. So pay attention to that, and then we click OK. Now you'll notice it did make it a little bigger. I'm not happy with that. Let's go bigger still. So I'm just going to resize it so it's even bigger. So let's go 16.5, 18.5. So still the same thing, pinned in the middle there. Canvas color white. All right, so that gives me a little bit more room all the way around. Like I said, I want to be able to get a clear path all the way around here. So now at this point, I am going to save as what? Photoshop, because I want to stop compression. Remember, this is a JPEG, which means if I open it, work on it, close it, I open it, I uncompress it, I close it, I recompress it. I'm literally destroying that image every time I work on it. So I'm going to change it to a Photoshop file. Photoshop will stop compressing it. So let's hit save. There we go. So now we're all set. Stop the compression, expanded the background. Now what we want to do is we want to select the shape of the label. Unfortunately, there's a nice little gray line all the way around here. All the way around. One of Photoshop's best tools for selection is called the magic wand. And by default, the magic wand has a tolerance of 32. A tolerance is kind of like a threshold. That means whatever pixel you select when you click on the background or you click on a section, like if I click on that green, it picks all the green pixels that are similar within 32 steps of green. So let's zoom in, take a look at that. So you can see it shows quite a few pixels. Go in here, it shows pretty much all of those beige pixels. Click in here. You can see it picked all the darker brown. Now you'll notice that it is kind of forgiving. It's got this kind of rusty orange color, but there's a little bit of red up here. It picked that too because it's within that 32-step color value variation. Now, anytime you've got something selected in Photoshop, if you want to unselect it, what is the shortcut key? Photoshop gurus, you're up at the plate. Anybody know? Escape? Oh, that would be a good thought. Nope. Escape for the Mac and Maya, probably that would work. Photoshop, nope. Hit escape, nothing happens. All right, so let's go take a look up here in the select menu. So deselect would be Command D on the Mac, Control D on a PC. All right, so Command D, that will deselect. Life is good. Zoom out a little. All right, now, what I want to do is click on this white background, and since the canvas is white back there, it should select all of the white pixels. So let's zoom in and see what kind of job it did tracking that edge. So actually, it looks pretty good. Now, the thing about tolerance is, let me deselect this. If I say, well, I want to have it pick exactly just the white pixel that I select. So I'm going to choose my tolerance at 1. And now you can see it's picking up a lot of the garbage on the edges. Things that we might not be able to see looking back here, but if we zoom in to almost pixel level, you can see there's like some noise in here. And that's keeping us from being able to, it's like some ghosty noise. It's keeping us from being able to select just that hard edge. So, like I said, I usually start at 32. If it doesn't pick up enough or it picks up too much, I'll either raise the tolerance or lower it. So right now, if I zoom in, it's kind of picking up it's going into that border a little bit. So let me see, let me try dropping that tolerance down to 16. Well, it's picking up a little more on the edges. Let's try dropping it down to 8. What I'm looking to do is just try and get all the way around the outside. So that's a little bit better. Zoom out. I want to go around, just make sure it's not dipping into anything. It looks like it's got the edge pretty good. All right, not too bad. So now I've got my selection done. This is where we make the alpha channel from our selection. So to do that, we go into the channels, and you'll notice you've got a combined RGB and you've got each individual RGB. Now, to create a to create a channel from the selection, you want to use this icon right here. Looks like a little, kind of light colored gray rectangle with a dark circle in it. Now, if you just click the plus sign, that'll give you a blank channel filled with nothing. But this will save your selection as a channel. So now when I click on that, Photoshop goes, oh, okay, what you have selected, you want me to keep. And that gives me my background, makes it white. The inside is now black. That means it is transparent. Does that give me the result I want? So which part of this do I want to keep? Yeah, I want the black. So consequently, but if I leave it black, it's going to be transparent. So what I need to do is invert my selection. The reason I want to invert it is because remember, in an alpha map or transparency map, black is transparent, white is opaque. And Photoshop was absolutely smart. Photoshop said, hey, I'm making you an alpha channel from your selection. So let me Z back in Photoshop. My selection is still there. Now, to invert a selection, you can go up to the select menu and inverse. It's also Shift Command I, and I believe on a PC it's Control Shift I. So invert. Now it has flipped. It's taken my selection and flipped it so that it selects everything but that background. So now I go back to channels. Now I want to create my channel from my selection. And now when I take a look at it, the background is black and the shape of my wine label is white. That's exactly what I want. I want that shape to be kept and I want that background to be removed when I render. So perfect. I'm going to save. And now I can deselect in Photoshop. I've got a PSD of this if I need to go back in and work on it or change my alpha channel. Now what I do is I want to save it as, and don't forget in Photoshop, you can't just save as, you actually have to save a copy. So now let's go in, make it a targa. And notice Photoshop said, hey, this is not an ordinary 3-channel targa. You've got an alpha channel. You probably want to save that. Yes, I do. Thank you. So now I'm going to get rid of that word copy and get rid of the space, put an underscore. And I always like to add the word alpha at the end of my file so I know it's a file with an alpha channel. So now I got my post and beam wine label with an alpha channel as a targa. So we're saving it. And don't forget targa options. This time you absolutely need 32-bit. If you don't do 32-bit, it will remove the alpha channel. So until now, we haven't needed a targa file with an alpha. So everything we've been doing with templates has been 24, but we need that extra 8 bits for the alpha channel. So I click OK. Now we've got a separate version with the alpha channel built in. So let me quit out of Photoshop because Maya and Photoshop don't play well together. So here is my default. You can see it's got a white background. But now when I take a look at this, you can see it's got a transparent background. It's got that kind of ghosty gray background that the Mac preview program shows you. That's exactly what I want my wine label to look like. All right, so far so good. Now, just like any other process, we need to assign a separate material to the label. Right now, this has the standard, or I should say AI standard surface 1, which is my generic diffuse material. So let's do Shift T. This will be my wine label. For this, I'm not going to change anything yet. What I want to do is I'm going to bring my color map in to the base color, just like I normally would. I'm not going to worry about plugging in the alpha channel yet. So base color. What do I need here to bring that file in? Yeah, need file. So on the left, 2D, file, that's what you need. And let's go look for our post and beam. So it should be alphabetical. If it's not here, it's inside my, here it is right here, Zen Garden. Post and beam wine label alpha. So you can see Maya even recognizes that it has an alpha channel and it goes, oh, you probably want me to display that alpha channel transparent. So there is your wine label. All right, so we click open. There we go. So you'll notice we've got it positioned, but we also get it repeating. It's just like continuing to repeat itself all over the place. Well, part of that is due to the fact that that label does not cover the entire 0 to 1 space or the shape of that label. So it just repeats itself, which is fine. We can fix that very simply. So anybody know where I would fix this issue in my network? So first off, let's take a look at the network. Let's open up the Hypershade. Let's find our wine label and graph it. Right click, graph network. There we go. So here's my network. Here's my shading group. That sends the information to the renderer. Here's my material, all my inputs, well, most of my inputs that are popular and used all the time. Here's my file node, and here's my place 2D. So where would I go to fix this issue right here? So there's my material, my file node, there's my place 2D. Well, I'll give you a hint. Anytime you get this issue, you get a logo, you get a sticker, you get a decal repeating itself, it's going to be in the place 2D. This gives you some UV control over this. Remember, everything that we do when we put a texture on is based on UVs. So if I click on my place 2D, you'll see I have this thing called wrap U. wrap V. If I uncheck them, there we go. My wrap U is off. My wrap V is off. So now I only have a single label. How does that look to the camera? Not bad. Could be a little bit bigger. So question is now, how do I make it bigger? Some people would say, well, you just scale it. Well, if I scale it, it's going to really ruin the way that the label conforms to the bottle. We don't want to do that. We're going to go into the UVs and play around with the UVs. So I'm going to select my object, go to my UV editor. Let's go UVs. There we go. And you can see my UVs are enormous, and there can hear everybody gasping. Oh, they got to be in a 0 to 1 space. Oh, well, honestly, unless you're taking it into Substance Painter or into Unreal or Unity, no, they don't have to be in the 0 to 1 space. I know that's heresy, but if you're not doing a pipeline that requires you to have a collage in the 0 to 1 space, a collage being all your UVs in that 0 to 1 space, then you don't have to worry about it. And in this case, you don't have to worry about it. So I'm just going to select my UVs. Now, if I scale them up, which is what you would think would happen, notice we're making it smaller because they are taking up less space on the wine bottle. So let's kind of scale it down a little. And what I want to do is just make sure that I can see a little bit on either side, which I can here. So let's see how that works. Well, let's go in and look from the render cam, because that's really where it matters. All right, so let's do this. Let's just worry about this part right here. All right, so I got a couple things going on. Kind of got this whole shape going on here and got this black area behind there and looks kind of weird. Well, that's because we need to plug the alpha channel into the opacity. What I want to do is I just wanted to make sure everything was okay. Now I can see my label's blown out. I can't really read it. So how do we fix too much light on an object? Do I adjust my lighting? Yes, thank you, Michael. Base weight of your material. If I adjusted my lighting, that adjusts the lighting for the entire scene, which you don't want to do. So let's go to base weight. Let's knock it down. I know I had to knock the table down quite a bit in order for that to not blow out too much. I do want it to be bright. So, well, let's start with this at 0.5, because that's what I kind of had the table at. So now at 0.5, oh, that's readable. So maybe I can go 0.6. It's a little bright. Let's try 5.5. I'll keep that there for now. Certainly a lot better than it was at 1. Can't read that. Whether that's too dark or not, we'll worry about that in a second. Let's do that. Yeah, disable that. Stop doing things. Okay. Check my render settings. Good. Okay. So now we can worry about getting rid of all of the stuff behind the label. So let's open up the Hypershade again. This is where we want to work. Wine label. Here's our opacity input down here. We've got our alpha channel. We take our alpha channel from our file, left click on that little green circle next to it, drag down a connection noodle and plug it into, wait, what? It doesn't work. Why is that? Wah, wah. All right, so part of the problem is this says opacity, but it's actually expecting a 3-color opacity channel. So what does that mean for us? Well, that means we need to connect the out alpha to one or more of these opacity controls. All right, so let me kick this off. Okay, it's still running. Stop that. There we go. All right, so I take out alpha, plug it into opacity R. No, didn't do anything. If I do it into G, didn't do anything. How about if I do it into B? Well, it doesn't look like it's doing anything. Let's stop that. And let's re-render. There we go. Part of the problem was Arnold wasn't catching up. It actually wasn't updating. All right, so let me break these connections. Let's do that again. So if I do one channel, notice I still have the green and blue. So you actually have to do it to every single one of them. So that alpha gets plugged into each of the 3 opacity RGB connections individually. If not, you will get a very strange looking opacity map. So now we've got the shape cut out from our wine label. There's the default. This is after we adjusted the base weight. And now that we've adjusted, or actually we've included the alpha, or yeah, the alpha part of our material into each section in our opacity channel. And again, that looks like this. Since the alpha is a single input, all the ones that are red that have multi-channels, they're going to turn off. So you need to expand it and then plug the out alpha individually into opacity R, G, and B. And that's it. It works. It's great. It actually does quite a nice job. So now we've got a wine label cut out to the shape of our bottle. Does that make sense? Questions? So you can, use this technique can be used for other things as well. All right, so this is required for the wine label. Want to have a nice wine label? I mean, if you use a square or rectangle wine label, you're not going to get points deducted. You just personally, if I'm going to go through the trouble of cutting something out, I want to have something that's got a little bit of interest in the shape. Because that's really going to sell it when you show it to somebody. What does it look like? Oh, it looks like the wine label's cut out and glued onto the bottle. All right, so that is basically what we call cutout opacity or an opacity map. Basically cutout patterns. All right, so this is the second portion of the slide, which I didn't want to show you until we actually needed it, because it doesn't really make sense why you would need to take the alpha and plug it separately into all the different channels. I don't know how they got moved, but it did. There we go. So don't forget, you get your alpha done in Photoshop, you save it out as a targa, make sure alpha channel is still there. You need a 32-bit image file. You bring it in, you put the color on, you resize it in UV editor if you need to, so that your label conforms to the marketing standards that we've set up. And then you need to plug your alpha channel into each of the RGB channels in the opacity part of the material. I should say section. Okay. So any questions before we move on? Anybody doing the interior? You probably don't, you don't have to worry about this, but for the exterior, absolutely need it. But good technique to use or to know about for the future. Okay, thank you. So let me save my Maya scene before I forget. Let's minimize that. And let's talk about projection mapping. So we talked about texture mapping, which is pretty much what we just got done doing with the wine label, right? Take a file node, put it on the geometry. We have some control for UV placement on the place 2D texture. As you can see, we can adjust the repeat. We can adjust a little bit of the fit. You know, we can kind of move it around the frame a little bit. But ideally, you know, you're stuck in 2 dimensions. You're stuck in U and V or X and Y, depending on how you're looking at it, or X and Z in Maya, because Y is up in Maya, whereas other software packages, Z is up. So get used to that also. Z up, Y up, the big debate. All right, now, projection mapping, we're taking a 2D file node, which is basically right here. There's that little network. So here's the file. There's the place 2D. There's the 2D portion. Now, if we want to take this and move it around in 3D, this is where we use projection mapping. Because projection mapping will allow us to take a 2D texture using a projector, and the projector has what's called a 3D placement. So we can move around in X, Y, and Z. So you can kind of think of this as a car for regular texture mapping. You're moving in 2 directions, right? Generally, unless you're, you know, jumping off of a jump somewhere, you don't get airborne in a car. If you do, it generally doesn't end very well unless you have a special vehicle. You're doing rally road racing or off-road racing. You know, there are vehicles meant to take air a little bit, but they're always going to come down. So think of this as kind of a helicopter, where we are no longer constrained to X and Y or U and V. Now we can take our car, put it inside the body of a helicopter, and now we've got the ability to go in 3 dimensions, X, Y, and Z. So we can position this anywhere we want, as long as the projector is aimed at the geometry. It will project this 2D onto it, and we can move it around in any of the 3 axes. Now, in order to do this, when you go to create a file node, you just don't left click on file. You have to right click on file in order to get this contextual menu. So let me pull up Maya here. And I've already got this saved. Let's make a brand new scene. Let's just throw a polyplane down. All right, there we go. I'm just going to assign an Arnold standard material, AI standard, Shift T. There we go. So if I want to put a logo on here, right, I would go into AI standard, go to base color, click on the checker button. And if I left click, that's going to give me a file node with a place 2D on it. All right, fine, but not very interesting. The file node, this is where we can plug our logo in. And for this purpose, I'm going to use the SAL logo that we provide for you guys in lesson 7. It's down at the bottom under the download section. So right here, that's what it looks like. White background. It's got SAL and a script. If I want to see it, I have to hit 6 on the keyboard, and you can see it's gigantic. It's huge. So now if I want to move this around, you know, I can kind of, well, right now it's not wrapping, but I could make it repeat. Turn off wrap U, wrap V. So I only got 1 copy now. But really, that's not how you want to make it resize. What you want to do, I can change the coverage. So right now, it's covering the entire 0 to 1 space. So if I cut that in half, there we go. But you notice I have this dark color everywhere that my logo doesn't cover. That dark area is actually coming from the file texture. Down here under an area called color balance, there's a default color, which is 50% gray. Why? Well, whenever you have a texture that doesn't cover the entire 0 to 1 space or your object, it needs to have some material property there. Remember, if you've got an object with no material property, it will not render and it won't display, and it'll be kind of a weird looking green in the viewport. So I can change this to match my background, which is white here, or, you know, I can make it black. But the default is 50% gray. So that's all fine and well. But now if I want to move this logo, it's not going to be very easy. I've got to kind of translate it in frame. So if I want to push it in the middle, I've got to kind of go like 0.25. If I want to push it up, I got to go like 0.25. All that to center that logo. Now, chances are this is probably going to be a lot smaller. Because if it's going to be a sticker, I want it to look like a sticker. So now if I want to stick it in the middle, it's got to be 0.5. But it didn't work. Why? Well, because it's Maya. So now we're in the middle. Weird numbers, not very friendly, especially if your boss comes in and goes, great job, but the customer wants it to be up just a little bit to the right. Oh, and they want to rotate it a little. Okay, rotating is pretty easy. Wait, how come I can't rotate opposite? Now, because you got to go 360 to go negative. All right, so that's an awful lot of trouble to do that and then have them go, no, can you put it back where it was? Oh, yeah, and make it bigger. Okay, how big? No, don't stretch it. Okay, I'm getting there. So you gotta know how your boss works. That's not it. No, I know, I'm working on it. How's that? Great. Can you make it a little smaller? So you go through this and you go, you know what? I'm better off if this is going to be movable and it's going to look like a label or a decal, or not a label, but a sticker. I really want to put it on as a projection because then I can move it around where I want it. So let's break free of our earthly bonds with UVs. I'm going to select my surface, do Shift T, assign another new material. Why? Because I want to start fresh. There we go. Nice, fresh, squeaky clean. Let's call this one sticker. Call it a decal, call it whatever you want, as long as it's PG, because you're probably going to show it to somebody. All right, so now I want to take that same sticker and I want to be able to put it on the surface, but move it around. So I'm going to assign my same logo into the base color like I did, but instead of left clicking on file, I'm going to right click. When you right click, you get a contextual menu like this. So right click, now I have the ability to create as projection. When you left click only, you only get create texture. So you have to right click, choose create as projection. And now in the hypershade, let's take our sticker and graph that network. Now we've got 4 nodes. We've got our file node with a place 2D, and we've got a projection. So let's put our sticker in to the file. It's going to be our SAL logo. There we go. So it's in there and you say, great, what the heck is that? Well, when you create a projection, you get a projector. Kind of looks like an area light, but it's not. If I pull it up off the ground, you can see it's got a diamond in the corner. That tells you this is a projector. And it will only show up where it is projected. Right now, it is projecting straight on. This little normal in the center looks like a normal. That tells you the direction of your projection. I need this to face down, because right now I'm just projecting right across the top of this. So let's rotate it, project it down. Now see, I'm in my place 3D, which is really controlling the projector. Let's go -90. So now I can move this around anywhere I want. But the problem is I've got all these evil minions with it. And you don't want all of those extra decals. We're not making a, contact sheet of all these little stickers. No, we just want one sticker. So that is controlled by the place 2D. This is the same issue we had with the wine label, where we had multiple copies of it. So we want to turn off wrap U and wrap V. So now I've got one copy that I can drag around anywhere. I want to make it bigger, just scale it up. I want to rotate it. Oh, guess what? That's pretty easy too. There you go. Oh, you want it over here? Good. Oh, you want it smaller? Hey, no problem. You want it back here? Oh, you want it to rotate in the other direction? Hey, no problem. You're paying the bills. There you go. Everybody's happy. Now, the issue is what happens when you've got this gray background, but you don't want the gray background. For example, most of the time we put a sticker on a surface that has a material on it. So for example, you put it on a box, it's got cardboard underneath of it. You put it onto a wall, it's got wall color under it. Put it on a wood table, it's got the wood background under it. The problem is this is covering up everything. So while this is great by itself, it doesn't really work well in the real world until we start to use layering. And this is where layering comes in for projections. Does that make sense so far? Jackson's good. Ion, Val, Blaine, Michael's good, thank you. Derek, Ekaterina, Janelle, Kyle.
All good here.
Will's good. Thank you, Will. Lauren, Michaels are good. That was good. Nicholas. All right. Looks like everybody's pretty good. So now we need to be able to put this on top of something else, even if it's a base color. So for example, if we want the background to be red, we want the sticker to be white. Great. We need to be able to do that. But the issue is, what happens if we want this sticker to not have a background? Well, that is also an issue that we address with layering and blend modes. Most of the time, you're probably going to use something like this as graffiti. You know, go into Photoshop, Substance Painter, paint a bunch of stuff up, come back in, drop it into Maya. Now, it's great if you do it in Substance, right? You're doing it in 3D already, but what happens if, you know, you do all that work in Substance and then you go, hey, can you move that graffiti over a little bit and scale it just a little bit? Yeah, sure, I'll go back into Substance and do that. Well, if it looks like you're going to be doing that a lot, it makes sense to make that a separate file, break it apart from the rest of the layers, so you can then do it in Maya. Take the graffiti portion, put it on a separate layer in Maya, and then be able to move it around. And this is where we get into layering. Now, to understand Maya's version of layering, we need to look at Maya's layered texture. Now, Maya's layered texture, let me show you where that is first of all. What I'm going to do is take my geometry. Actually, let's just remove this projection. So there's my sticker. Let's go here. Let's break this connection. So I can right click on the word color, break connection. That removes this. I can delete it, which I'm going to do. I'm just going to put this back to, well, I'm going to put it at the default. Why not? 0.8 for now. So let's take a look at Maya's layered texture. Now, this is what the node looks like, but in order to get to the layered texture, there's a couple ways you can do it. One is you go through the material, just like you would put a texture on or a file node. So I go base, color, click on the checker button. And instead of using 2D, Maya's layered texture is under Other. So when you first click on this checker input button, notice all 4 attributes or categories are highlighted. So this is 2D, 3D environment textures, which nobody uses anymore. That's used to be in place of the old, it's Maya's old school version of like a dome light or a reflection sphere. Right? Layered textures live in Other textures. So if I click on that, that creates a layered texture and puts it at the base. Notice there is no 2D, place 2D or place 3D. This is just a container. No transform information. It is meant to house or contain 2D textures or 3D textures. So when you look at the attributes of it, you'll see the layering system itself is horizontal. Now, you start off with a single layer. In Photoshop, it's pretty simple, right? In Photoshop, you've got the little plus sign down here, you got a little upturned page, right? You click on that, it creates a new layer. In Maya, you create a new layer by clicking anywhere in the blank spot. And notice you get this disgusting lime green color for every layer. That is basically a placeholder going, hey, if you don't put anything in me, this is what you get. Now, to delete a layer in Photoshop, you select it, hit the delete key. Can't do that in Maya. You hit the delete key, it deletes everything. Don't do that. You have to delete each layer individually by clicking the little X box underneath of each layer icon. Now, the trouble is, if you miss, guess what you do? You get aggravated and you start creating more layers. So be very careful. The more agitated you get, the more Maya thrives. Remember, Maya works off of your tears, regret, and shame. Because Maya is a computer, or it's an operating system on a computer, and computers hate humans. So let's do 3 layers there. Now, each layer is controlled by attributes underneath. When you select it, the attributes change, but right now they're all green. It's hard to tell. So let's make this first one red. We'll keep that green. We'll make the last one blue. So we got our RGB colors here. So when I click on a layer, it shows me the attributes for that layer. Right now, the top layer is chosen. The top layer is all the way to the left. Now, in Photoshop, if you want to move layers around, you just left click and drag. On Maya, you can't do that. You have to middle mouse click and move. So if I want my green layer to be on top, I have to middle mouse click the green layer and move it in front of the red. If I want to put this all the way at the end, put the blue up front, I got to move them and do that. So right now, each layer is covering up the other layers. They've got no way to blend together. Now we control layer visibility in Photoshop using the eye icon. And here we control visibility using the little checkbox says layer is visible. So if I select my first layer, turn it off, guess what? My red layer is visible. If I select that and turn it off, now my green layer is visible. If I select that and turn it off, now I got nothing. So think of Maya's layering system sort of like Photoshop, except that it fell down sideways. Now, so far, we've tackled creating layers, moving them around, deleting layers, controlling layers. You got to make sure you select it, the attributes down underneath. We also have, in Photoshop, you've got opacity. In Maya, we've got something called alpha. So if I want my red to kind of bleed through my blue a little, I turn the alpha down on my blue, or I should. Let's make it over. Make all these over. So now, there we go. So now, when I turn it down about halfway, I got half red showing through and half blue. I'm blending it manually, just by ghosting it. Now, if I want my green layer to show through, I got to kind of knock the red down also. So when I do that, you know, that green comes through and I'm kind of got this lavender color. So that's all fine and well. But generally, we're not going to ghost layers. We want to be able to control what is displayed based on a blend mode. All right, so this brings us to blend modes. In order to understand blend modes, you know, there are quite a few blend modes. Photoshop's got probably the most out of any program. Substance has quite a few. Maya's got like the bare bones. And honestly, even here in Maya, there's probably more than you will ever use. Honestly, we use roughly 2, maybe 3 blend modes. Right? One of the blend modes is called add. The other is called multiply, and another one is called over. Now, we used over or overlay in Photoshop when we did our sharpen layer. We did a high pass filter layer. We wanted that to sit on top of the other layers and filter, you know, the midtones through, so we got more contrast for our brick wall. Well, for this, it depends on, first off, what we need our top layer to do to interact with the bottom layer. But in order to understand, you know, anything about layering and blend modes, we need to understand and assign the proper values to black and white, because honestly, that drives most of your decisions. So in Maya, in CG, in art generally, or at least, you know, computer graphics art, black is equal to what numeric value? Basically, what number? Yeah, 0. White is equal to what? Anybody out there in Zoom? It is 1. So if you understand that 0 and 1, that will show you how these different blend modes work. So I'm going to take 0, plug it into the first equation here, and it's really not an equation. So let's go 0, let's plug 1 into the next one. Let's go to multiply, plug 0 in, plug 1 in. So now we've got black, we've got white under add, black and white under multiply. Now, the result here, the sum of these equations is going to tell you whether you use add or multiply to figure out which one you need to remove either white or black. So in our SAL logo, the background is white, very similar to this AAA logo. So if we want to remove white and keep the black, we can use a blend mode. If we have a black background and we want to remove the black, keep the white, or keep any other color here, we need to figure out which blend mode to use. Now, our SAL logo is going to be represented. Let's go back to, well, we don't have our SAL logo in here, but our SAL logo or our AAA logo here, it's going to be represented by a color or actually a value. So this could be, I've got a wooden texture and I want to put that on top. I got a wooden swatch I want to put on top of another object. And I want the wood to cover it up, but I don't want it to cover up the entire object. So I got some numbers that I've cut out. They're made of wood. I want to put them on top of concrete for whatever reason. But the idea is we've got a background, either black or white. We've got a sticker, a decal that we want to have show up in our layering system. So let me go back here and do this. So I've got my 3 layers here. So for example, what if I want to add my AAA logo here? Or my SAL logo? Let's use SAL logo. So for my SAL logo, I've already got my layer texture here. So I'm going to create a new layer. And that new layer, I want to sit on top because I want to have my logo on top and I want to be able to choose the background color for it, depending on what the client wants. So I'm going to put this new layer that I made, that's going to be my SAL logo. I'm going to put that at the top of the stack, which means this is the top layer. This is the bottom layer. So to do that, I middle mouse click, drag. Now here you have a color attribute just like you do in your material. So this is where I can plug my AAA logo into, or my SAL logo. I keep saying AAA, but SAL, since that's what we used earlier. So here, let's do that. Now, I want to put it on as a projection because I want to move it around. So in order to do that, I have to click on 2D, and I can't just left click on File. I have to right click, and that will give me a menu. And now I can use Create as Projection. So let's go into our Hypershade. Take a look at our new sticker network. All right, so here, there's my layers. And these are just color swatches. But this one on the top, this is my projection. My projection shows up center of the world, just like it should. Where are you? Right here. There we go. Kind of hard to see. So I'm going to put my SAL logo in here. And don't forget, I have to aim it down. So right now I got a couple of things going on. You say, where are my layers? Well, your layers are still here. Let me turn the visibility off on my top layer. So there's the green, or there's the blue, there's the red, there's the green. So they're all still here, but they're being covered up by our SAL. Now I need those layers underneath to show through. So I could try ghosting out the SAL, just kind of, let's change that to over. Just kind of ghost it out, but the problem is I'm going to lose my type eventually. So what I need to do is figure out which blend mode to use. So for now, let's clean this up. I got too many copies. That's easy to fix. Whenever you create a projection, don't forget your decal is going to repeat over and over till it covers the entire surface, or 0 to 1 frame. So let's turn off wrap U, wrap V. There we go. All right, so let's go back here. So this will be our SAL logo. We can represent that with a random number. Somebody throw out a random number. Could be any number other than 0 or 1. All right, Tyra said 8. So our SAL logo is going to be represented by 8. So let's plug 8 in here. So we've got 8. Now, let's do some simple math here. So 0 plus 8 equals what? 8, exactly. 1 plus 8 equals, oops, should be 8. 1 plus 8 equals 9, thank you. Now let's go under multiply. 0 times 8 equals what? 0, very good. And 1 times 8 equals what? 8, very good. Simple math. Now the object is, we're looking for the result that will leave the SAL logo intact, but remove either black or white. So in our case, our SAL logo has a white background. So we want to have a white background removed, but keep our SAL. So white is 1. Now, if we add 1 to our logo, we get 9. That doesn't leave just the logo. But under multiply, 1 is white. 8 is our logo. We multiply the white out to leave just the logo. Sounds a little complicated, but honestly, you have a 50-50 shot. So the way this works is, we've got our SAL logo. It's got a white background. Easy to see if I do that, white background. What I want to do is, I want to have my blue background show through and not block my, stop that, not block my SAL. All right, so what I want is, I want to use multiply because I want to get rid of the white and keep just the SAL. All right, so back here in my layer texture, there's my layer. Right now, my blend mode is set for over, which means it is covering up anything underneath. So if I change it to multiply, notice that it got rid of the white background and kept the blue. But the problem is there's this super dark area around here, and that has to do with the default color. That's kind of why I mentioned it. Wherever our decal does not cover the surface, we've got this default gray. So what I need is, I need to have that default gray match my background. My background is white, so I change default color to white. Now it blends in. Now when I go in and do my blend mode, which is multiply, now I've got my SAL logo. So now if I turn these off, it's visible through any of those other layers. And I just have those layers in there just to kind of show what's going on. So this I can make bigger. Let's make it red, make it bigger. I can rotate it, scale it up, move it around, obviously. Just make sure you select the place 3D of the projector to move it around. And now that's my SAL logo. Like I said, you have a 50-50 chance. Most common blend modes are either multiply or add. For example, if you choose add instead accidentally, this is what will happen. It will take out the black and leave just the white area here, which is just that part. So, like I said, you got a 50-50 chance. When you use multiply, you're getting rid of the white, which is the background. When you use add, you're getting rid of black. You're leaving everything but black, which gives us this. So, like I said, if you guess wrong, you have a 50-50 shot. Now, this will become a little more apparent when you've actually got a texture instead of a solid color. So, for example, let me turn off visibility on all these layers. So it's solid black. Let's create a new layer. Now, all the visibility is turned off on all these layers, so it doesn't really matter, but I'm going to throw this one underneath. And in this layer, I'm going to plug in a wooden texture that I've got. So let's see, what do I have here? Walnut, why not? Let's do that. So again, blend mode, if I choose the wrong one, say for example, I want to get rid of this white background. It doesn't look white here, but it actually is white. Want to get rid of the white background. But I choose the wrong blend mode. I get rid of the black. Well, notice it lets my wood underneath show through, but it got rid of my black type. And I kind of got this milky color going on out here because it got rid of the black, but not the whites also. A little weird, but the idea is that you've got a 50-50 shot. That's actually what I want it to look like. Now, the thing about a layer is you can ghost it so that it looks like this logo or decal is kind of faded into the wood. So let me lighten that wood color up a little, which I can actually do inside here. Let's take the color off. So now it's going to kind of make it milky. I don't want that. That's not going to change exposure. Yeah, exposure will do that. You don't want to use exposure here. You'd rather, you actually should do it in something else. Let's make that 0.5. Unfortunately, this doesn't really render that well. I'm just turning it up so we can see it in the viewport. This is really for viewport only, because if I render this, it's really not going to look all that good. Plus, I don't have any lights, so there's that. But this is purely just for viewport, this exposure. So don't get too excited and go, yeah, that solves all my problems. No, no, no. Got to go into Photoshop if you want to tone an image. The only reason I'm doing this is so that we can see what happens when we ghost the logo on top of the wood. So if I want it to look like this is kind of faded into the wood, I can knock down the alpha portion. So now I've got the wood starting to show through. It doesn't cover it up completely. And like I said, that alpha or that exposure is just dreadful. There we go. All right. So that's kind of a quick overview for layering in Maya, how layering blend modes work. Honestly, the two most popular are add and multiply. Once in a while, we use over. Like you saw, I used over when I wanted to ghost the two colors together in my green, or actually it was in my red and my blue. So let me turn off that. Turn on my red, turn on my blue, yeah. So if I want to ghost my red underneath my blue, you know, that's what you use over for. All right, let's see. You know what? When we come back, I'm going to give you a demo on actually using this in the exterior. And also we'll do how to use this in the interior since it is required. We'll pick up when we come back. We'll take a short break. It'll give me a chance to render out the first part of lecture. Any questions so far? The reason we're going over this is because projections, you need at least one projection in your interior or your exterior. So we provide you with the files, but like I said, I'm going to show you how to use them. And then you can also, if you wanted to, make your own kind of PG, audience appropriate for all ages graffiti if you want to. All right, so questions before we head on break? Yangi, Javier, Will, Tyra, Nicholas, Lauren's good, Derek's good, thank you. Kyle, Janelle, Katerina, Derek. Derek's good, thank you. Katerina's good. Val, questions? Ion, anybody? Jackson, you good? Okay. All right, so let's stop the video here and let's take a break. We'll see you guys back here at 9:15. So I'll see you back here at 9:15. We'll pick up and we'll do some more demos.